Hi, I'm Zach Posen. I'm here for Creatively, and I'm going to be talking about my history, about the process of my creativity in draping, and excited to be here.
Hello, I'm Susan Bender. I'm a freelance fashion stylist, creative director, and contributing editor to British Vogue. Welcome to Creatively Classes. In 2004, Zach was awarded one of fashion's most prestigious honors, Swarovski's the Perry Ellis Award for Women's Wear by the CFDA. In 2015, Zach was awarded Design of the Year by Women's Wear Daily and Variety magazine. Zach is known globally for his technique in artisanal craftsmanship, anatomical construction, and textile manipulation. His daywear, suiting, and red carpet evening wear are infused with his bold sophistication, sexy femininity, and distinctive glamour. Over the years, his designs have been worn by leading women, including Uma Thurman, Natalie Portman, Oprah, First Lady Michelle Obama, Gwyneth Paltrow, Naomi Watts, Claire Danes, and Rihanna. Zach's a lover of food and an inventive chef, and gained an enormous following on Instagram, where he showcases his cooking with the hashtag Cooking with Zach, which led to him to create his first cookery book, Cooking with Zach, published by Rodale in October 2017. His recipes have been featured in Food and Wine, Vogue.com, On the Table with Eric Rippert, Good Morning America, The Martha Stewart Show, and The Chew. The documentary House of Zed, chronicling Zach's career, premiered at the 2017 Tribeca Film Festival to critical acclaim and is currently available on Netflix. Along with consistent support of St. Jude's, the LGBTQIA community, and City Harvest, amongst others, Zach also is an ambassador for the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. Now, we'd love to invite our audience to participate and submit any questions via the Q&A tool within the Zoom. We'll try and answer as many questions prior to the end of the class, but let's start with Zach and ask him a few questions about how he broke into fashion.
Hi.
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 Famously
across the land and across the pond.
Across the land and across the pond. The weather isn't as great here as it is there, but we'll make good. So you started in the industry really young and held your first show when you were 21. Can you describe what drew you to fashion as a young person, as a young designer?
Absolutely. Well, I think, my first love of fashion came from growing up in the streets of New York and seeing the interaction and intersection between art, music, and fashion, and expressing myself through my imagination and my creativity and my hands. And that was very nurtured. So for parents out there that have young people that they feel are creative or need expression, and I actually believe that everybody has creativity inside them, please encourage your children, find the materials. It can be simple. Get them off the iPad and get their hands dirty. And it really started on figurines, from my sister's dolls to Star Wars figurines. I am a 1980s child. And then the movies. My father showed me every possible movie, and my father is also an artist and a painter. So I grew up seeing his creative process at home, and it was a very respectful process. I couldn't interrupt him and run into his studio as a child, and I had my space in my little room. And my dad's paintings actually, before I was born, dealt with fabric. And I grew up in Lower Manhattan in Soho, which was originally a cutting room area. It's where they would cut excess fabric. It was a garment center of some sort and an industrial area. So when we would walk the dogs, a lot of the house was made up of objects that were found on the street. And there was lots of fabric.
Yeah.
And the fabric became my Play-Doh. And the fabric cuttings that would be left out to be picked up by the garbage trucks were things that I would collect, and were also pieces that my dad was using. And I would chop up these pieces and kind of find how shapes fit on my figurines. I also had a fabulous, incredible, loving older sister who was very creative. And so we had our own kind of fantasy land. I also had trouble reading when I was little. And so creativity was a real way that I was able to express and get my energy out, and really learn and tell stories. So my earliest pieces were finding shapes on the body and seeing what happens when a flat shape falls. And I think as well, early 80s in New York were an amazing time, obviously in fashion in the city and globally. So really early on, when I would walk to school, I would see, the first Comme des Garçons store, and all of a sudden this idea that you could express, that clothing could be expressive or artistic, and that you can express character through dress. That it's an extension of your personality, and it is an artistic expression. I will never forget seeing like the Yohji Yamamoto store open in Soho as a little kid, and the Azzedine Elias store, which is now where the APC store is. Right. And these are very formative things that I would, that was my my walk to school every day. And I didn't know who these designers were, but the neighborhood was kind of happening, and I loved to dress, and I loved the movies, and would make my own clothing as a little boy. And then at 16, my mom said, get a job, time to get a summer job. And I got an internship. And I remember my mom said, what do you mean there's not getting paid? And I said, this is how it is. And, I, through a friend, knew somebody at Nicole Miller, which was like a real 7th Avenue company. And it was the first time I'd ever seen a workroom. And, I was sketching. I didn't even understand fashion illustration. And all of a sudden these formulas of like 10 heads high, and these crazy ideas of these impossible bodies, that were just not real, but, fashion drawings. And it's when I worked on my first fashion show for her. And I met a lot of the models of the time. And they kind of knew I was starting to make clothing, and they would ask me to make them pieces. And that's kind of just how it started. I was dressing my friends, and really kind of word of mouth. And, it was the late 90s in New York, and, there was a lot of great style and attitude. And then I did an internship at the Metropolitan Museum in the Costume Institute. And, I think what's important is like, once you find that thing that has that pull in you, you kind of have to put yourself out there and really go for it and take the risk. And, one day I was in the museum. Museums were like our retreat as a family. My dad is very methodical and concentrated in museums. And I just grew up tagging along basically and trying to understand what he saw, but also he allowed me to find what I liked. My mom and dad did. And one day I was in the museum and I heard this voice, and it sounded like Vincent Price, and it sounded familiar. And from there I asked, could I have an internship to this guy who was giving a tour? And it turned out he was the curator. His name was Richard Martin at the time. And I wrote this letter, and they said, you're a little young to intern here, but we'll figure it out. And that was my introduction really into a great love of fashion history and of bias cutting clothing. And at that time, there was a great book being put out and being made of Madeleine Vionnet. And that clothing really, she was a great designer and really worked with bias clothing, and she really loved women. I mean, I think she's like the Brancusi, who's a great sculptor of fashion. They have a real fluidity to them, a real femininity, but they were powerful women, and they're powerful clothing, and they had a real integrity to them, and it like struck a beat in me. And we also have to remember at this time, it's really the height of the beginning of the incredible build of John Galliano and of Alexander McQueen. And it was really powerful to me because it combined my love of film, of history, of theater. And I just thought, like, this is it. This is like, this is, you know, this is beauty, this is fantasy, this is expression, technique. And it just really hit a note in me. And also Gautier. I mean, Gautier was that moment in fashion, and Issey Miyake were really kind of the things that got me going and excited. And I kind of delved into the history of fashion and learning as much as I could. And then to kind of pay for my travel from high school to the Met, because I went to high school in Brooklyn, so it was a long subway ride there, I would cross the park after my internship and go work at a vintage couture store, which still was like a newish thing, although it just wasn't vintage fashion, or that 80s fashion was not in vogue at the time. And I went to this store on the Upper West Side called Allen and Susie. And there it was like my introduction into Terry Mugler and a lot of these incredible designers of that time period, Jean Muir, and things, you know, we have to remember the internet did not exist. It wasn't an easy Google search. You had to find and research. And from there, it kind of brought me into subculture in New York and into the nightlife and into kind of the drag queen world and these self-created creatures. And I was really little, but it was a great escape and a great experience to see. And New York was a little dangerous then, and definitely had more punk attitude. And I would dress every day. My exploration of clothing also came through self-dressing and seeing the reaction of New Yorkers in like the most weirdest, wild clothing and outfits I could put together. And I remember one of the first things I made in high school was this floor-length fake fur coat that was like a caftan, and it would train, and I just wore it everywhere. And it kind of, you know, really long black and white hair, and I'd wear, you know, I'd find fedora feathers from old hats and wear those in my hair. And it became seeing like how fashion can react with people and how it can bring joy. And I would time my subway car so that I would get the train commuters in the same train car. And for like 4 years in high school, it became this dialogue on my train car. I also, my high school job was taking this young girl at the time who was a neighbor to high school, and she was Lena Dunham. And, you know, I'd make her perform, I'd dress her up on the subway car. And, you know, we just were learning and having a blast. And I kept doing other internships. I did an internship at a company called Toka after that, and met a woman, Alex White, for the first time. And, you know, this idea of the stylist or a creative director came into play, or the idea that maybe if you have a fashion brand, there's other elements that come into it. So there was working on like a candle at the time, and you know, just picking up on these things. And then I had to decide whether I was going to design school or, you know, an academic school, because
so in a way,
you academics.
Did it the other way around. You got your experience before you actually went to have your formal training, because you went to Parsons in New York and Central St. Martin's, which is actually in London. So you had a lot of real world experience.
Kind of. I was pretty young and innocent. I didn't, you know, but I definitely was like in it. You know, I had found my thing. I'd given up the idea that I was going to be a Broadway star or singer, dancer, actor. My voice was changing, you know, no more. And it was like, this is it. Like, I want to be in the costume shop. I was in the costume shop in high school a lot, creating very elaborate looks, doing the makeup, the hair, the whole thing, and just, you know, really plain, and also learning really how to sew and how to drape and how to pattern make. And I applied to St. Martin's, and I applied to the foundation year and to the regular program. And I was 17 probably at the time, and they accepted me into the regular program. So I was like, cool, I'm going to skip a year of college. I probably wish I had done the foundation year, and I'm going to move to London. And this kind of magical world and idea that I had no idea what I was getting into. And, St. Martin's, I wouldn't say is necessarily formal training, but it definitely, because it's not necessarily a technical school. However, I remember my first day there, they start with a project called the White Project.
Yeah.
And, your ideas around that and what that means. And I was really into the idea of strength, but also innocence and purity and innocence lost. And I decided that I wanted to pattern armor. I wanted to pattern in felt a Velasquez arm, which is a great painter.
Incredible.
And I didn't want to have any seams in it. I wanted it all done out of like darts and folds and cuts in one piece. And that's when I met incredible pattern making teachers there that had taught the greats like Hussein Chalayan and Stella McCartney, yes, and John Galliano and McQueen at the end. I just remember sitting down at the table and thinking of this piece as itself, like in geometry, and cutting into it and imagining how those folds would form something that felt like armor or felt like a horse hoof at the same time too, because there was this whole side saddle equestrian thing going too. Because I was in Great Britain, and then kind of found objects, and I was also going out there because you don't have real structured classes at that college, and so you kind of do your work and then get critiqued to death, which was really scary, but amazing preparation for the fashion industry. I mean, they would just tear you a new one. And with every project, you kind of go away for like 3 weeks and then get like torn up in front of your whole class. And kids in tears in the bathroom, or not kids. I was a lot younger than everybody when I went to school there. And I met magical, wonderful people in my time in the UK, and that kind of introduced me into British fashion and into Ozzie Clark.
Yes.
And I met this amazing family, the de Villeneuves, and I was like out at a nightclub, and these girls,
Daisy.
were Daisy and Poppy.
Yes,
and Jan.
And mother, Jan. I know them all.
And Jan, I mean, this was like literally like my first nightclub, and these girls were there, and they were half American, and their mom had been modeling since the 60s. And
she still is now.
And Jan is still modeling now. And, it's kind of amazing because it was like, okay, here are people that also understand, an American side too. So it was very comfortable.
Yes.
And they became my family. I also moved to London with somebody I'd met that summer that was my fit model and muse at the time, a girl named Jessica Jaffe. And and so we lived together there, and she had gone to boarding school and, kind of felt very fabulous and, kind of brilliant and stunning, like, the most beautiful red hair I'd ever seen. I was, it'd be like color swatches, little cuttings of her beautiful raven hair. And, it was just a great free time there. Kept working. I kept learning about, this time in 60s fashion and in London. And, it was quite punk and quite rogue. And a friend said, I have a friend who's moving to London, and she was a new photographer, and I needed a roommate. And this woman came one day. Came home, and I'd left the keys in the basement flat, and it was a woman named Vanina Sorrenti, and she was starting her photography career in London. And so then it kind of introduced me to a whole other world of East London and Jefferson Hack and Dazed and Confused, and it kind of all came together. And I started making kind of these rogue t-shirts. Like I had my school projects, and then I would like start collaborating. Fashion is a collaboration. And I think that's essential and important in many creative processes. You can have your solo time, but there's so many hands and steps that touch it, and you have to learn to be a really great collaborator. So I kind of brought in my crew. Like I found, kind of my Charles Dickinson crew of people. So I had a girl from fashion communication and promotion in my little basement sitting there working. I had the different kind of muses and fit models that I found at the time. And, I started making these punk t-shirts, and I would tea stain them, coffee stain them, wash them, distress them, take like a beautiful dark regal velvet trim and put it on the neck. And then I'd make these kind of leather epaulets to it. So there were kind of these like theatrical punk, Byzantine t-shirts. And I would take them in my little suitcase because I wanted to like get them out there. And I first took them to Pineal Eye, and I met with them, and they're like, we don't know, it was definitely a different thing at that time. Like distressed hadn't happened yet, I guess. Like Rick Owens didn't really exist, so the only thing kind of in that realm would have been Ann Demolmeister probably.
Right.
And then I kind of like really sad and felt totally denied and probably beat up from whatever had happened in school at the time, which was highly competitive. And then I took them to another store in Soho in London called Coke and Tozai. And they said, we'll take them. Like, we'll take them on consignment. So that was my first experience at retail.
Incredible.
And and then
in London, aren't they? There were two seminal stores for young designers to find great design there. And your t-shirts were just, you describing them, it's so removed from your signature of draping. I mean, what attracted you to draping? Even though listening to you talk about your experience and life in New York as when you were younger, you were talking about picking up fabrics and making the arm out of.
Well, I love glamour. I mean, we can't say that. I deeply love the power of glamour and the power of strong femininity through expression. And I think that's where draping came from, the time at the Met. The idea of like a ball gown, I don't know. I mean, maybe the romanticism of that, what was happening in the nostalgia of what was happening in fashion at that time probably brought me in there, or like La Croix, or the finale show of Mugler that happened there. I mean, I think that was kind of formative. When I was at the Met, a lot of the curators and people went to help restore or work on that show. And that idea, it's not the existence I grew up in. I grew up in a pretty kind of bohemian existence, and, high fashion for me was going to a store called Century 21. Like that's where I saw, high fashion, or would like get my birthday present, and save up, probably Westwood. I think Vivienne was really, I'm a rebel. So, you gotta break some rules.
Develop your style?
Personally, my style was like really theatrical, really historical, futurism. I was really into this, into a costume designer, Japanese designer named Iko, and I don't know, just ideas of past meeting the present and the future, and fluidity and form.
Yes, and movies as well, because you watched a lot of movies.
And the movies. I mean, I watched. I love my movies, and I love to escape into this other world, a different time.
Yes.
And so draping, and that led me, when I started my brand. I came back to New York, and there was interest in me starting my brand. That's what lured me out of school. I didn't get the internships I wanted to, and it lured me back to New York. And there was somebody that had wanted to be my partner, and at that point, press had started. You said, where does the draping come from?
Yeah.
I think from like frocks. I mean, it really started with like bias frocks, and at the time at St. Martin's, there was a brand in London called Ghost, and it had really good viscose, and they gave the excess fabric to school where we could buy it, on the cheap.
Oh,
And it was just the best fabric. And I would be
it was
making these like,
beautiful. It hung so
yeah,
well, didn't it?
it did. It really had good bounce. It had a good wash to it. And so, I made a dress for some girlfriends of mine, and the incredible, a real force in my life was Naomi Campbell. And she
Wow.
came and she saw this piece and she wanted the dress.
Yes.
And so I met her, and she was just wonderful and formative to me and teaching me. And, I tried to make a very intricate bias satin dress for her with all these cutouts and hundreds of pieces. But in the meantime, was making all these little pieces. And, she really kind of got behind me and nurtured in a really beautiful way. And so I came back to New York. Retailers had started, there had been press. I would say that, like a year and a half before I started my company, there was a big piece in what was the fashion of the Times, which is now T Magazine, part of New York Times. And this British writer, Daisy Garnett, saw this piece of mine and wrote an article about this piece and this dress. And the article in my movie world was called A Star is Born.
Yes.
And that was that kickstarted a whole flow of press, and the opportunity kind of was there. And I got a grant when I came back to New York to kind of do my first mini collection. And the draping started then. So then it was like, we got to do it.
Yeah. So what do you like to have when you're doing it to start?
So when I drape now, many years later, fast forward 20 years, I usually have my music on. I'm usually stretched out. I love to sketch, I will tell you that. And I don't believe there's a formula of creativity. But often, to me, you can get hand expression through draping. So I like to have my pin cushion. I like to have it easily available, pin loaded. I think that's really important. I usually tie an elastic around.
Right.
Often there's elements that you forget that you have assimilated or kind of helped, find your own formulas or ways, and that's through collaboration or through experience. So I need my scissors. I need more pins usually, and then like large cutting scissors. And this is like when we get really dirty in the process, because it's like, it's not necessarily always, it's not the final result in this period. Often I actually like my drapings and the kind of rogue expression that happens in that period versus sometimes the final process.
Right.
But, you have to also remember that I got really young, kind of thrown into an American system, because there still was this very major American system. And I also had this real kind of epiphany at that moment in 2001 that maybe like craft was declining. Yes. And so it was kind of exciting also to be able to make things really refined and really clean at the time. Today where I'm sitting, I just want to lose all of that, because like, who needs that? There's plenty of, polish and clean. But it's a wonderful thing to know how to do. And it's like when you're a painter or you draw, you almost want to get back to that place when you're a little kid, because it's really a pure thing. So, when
so do you
here's a tool
at a time, or do you work on multiple pieces together when you're draping?
It depends. Sometimes I'll be working on multiple pieces. I've had times where I've like laid something on a form and just let it sit there for a while and then revisit it. I'm very quick in draping. So I can like plow through the process.
Yeah. And do you have in mind?
Yeah.
Do you have a shape in mind when you actually start to approach a new work? Is it sketched out before, or do you know in your head, okay, I want to try this technique? How do you talk us through your approach?
Yeah, there are different approaches to it. Sometimes if it's a commission or if it's been for a collection, there were techniques applied. If I know that somebody, if I knew it was for a runway show and there was a theme, I would also have my fabric techniques pre-developed that I could either Xerox or place into the piece. Or I knew there was a kind of form or technique or pin tuck that we had developed in collaboration with the studio. But at the basis of the form within my work is line and form, and I'll use like a seam tape to draw cuttings of the way that the body is broken up. And I always say it's like taking a line on the body, and that can happen through drape or through line.
Right.
So, you know, the human form is infinitely different and beautiful. I'm continuously inspired by movement and form and the emotion of the human body.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I start with tool here,
Yeah.
you know, I could choose, for example, so we can start, sorry, I have to get, so first of all, if you want to get tension in fabric, I'm using a safety pin, you could use a straight pin. You want to pin against gravity so that it holds it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if I were to pin like that, when I pull it, and I'm not going to do it because I could poke an eye out, it will pull out.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I pinned here, for example, I have so many choices to go, right? And I'm going to feel it out. And it can be the music I'm listening to. It can be, you know, often things in nature, a form of a flower. But I can tell any story from this moment, from the first pinning. And, you know, I could be very collected. I can talk about dimension and flatness and contour. I can shade the body. I can form the body. I can take that anywhere. I can be very organized and strict and graphic. You know, with tool, you can really pull it and stretch it.
Yes.
You can wet it. There ain't no rules. That's really.
Do you always work with tool?
No.
Work with tool?
No, but it looks good on camera.
Okay, so let's see what you're going to make.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to make today, but you know, we're just going to go there. I just wanted to talk about kind of tension and form and, you know, transparency. I think it looks good on there.
Yeah.
You know, we can take that there. That's, you know, one takeaway there.
So are you approaching design work differently now that you're not working on a runway collection every season?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm still finding it. To me, creativity is a lifelong pursuit. And that's a really beautiful thing. And you have the ability to evolve and refine and define. I think what I think is important is to have your base in what that is. And I think that it's not definable today. And, you know, even when I think about design process, and I've worked in technology a lot, I worked with digital printing and rendering. You know, maybe that's going to be some way. How do we get tactile hand into that? But when I'm building, it can really tell any story. So have I approached it differently? I'm trying to really kind of break formulas that I had gotten comfortable with.
Right.
That's really important for me in kind of how I feel in my next stage, or things or rules or even time processes that I had become very used to, and or following the marketplace. And you know, I kind of think a lot of that is today, which is really exciting, a lot of hogwash. I really think, you know, it's like being born a little too early. You know, you just don't have to define it. And I think that's a really cool thing today. And I also see people that come from a different approach to fashion, and I watch them learn their craft through the process of it, through challenge, and vice versa. I don't know, maybe I'm going to be making really casual clothing. Maybe it's not going to be about wearable clothing per se. But it would be a shame to lose the beauty and romanticism of what I do as well. Although, you know, sometimes you just want to like burn it, chop it up, whatever, you know, it doesn't always have to be pretty. But today we're going to be pretty, because why not? Because we're in sunny LA. It feels a little bridally, which is fine too. Everybody deserves that in their big moment if they choose. So that could be that. And, we can talk about bias because I think that's an important stage, and I'm going to use the same mannequin. So in fabric, I'm sure a lot of you know that, fabric has a warp and a weft, right? So the fabric goes goes vertically and horizontally, and it's like a web, right? It's threads that are twisted. Those twists of fabric have different tensions, different dimensions, different washes, and are made out of different materials, which give it different properties, right? Silk, that is, a natural fiber, has the ability to have real movement to it and drape. And what's amazing in a fabric is that you have the ability to turn it on a 45-degree angle. And all of a sudden, you have the ability of movement and drape, and you have the ability that web, when it goes like this, and it goes over a form that has shape, has the ability to mold in a different way. And that's like really exciting because it's like you start to get, it's like if you were on Photoshop or on a Pro Tool or, I don't know, whatever app you're on, and all of a sudden you can like distort.
Yes.
And that's like really something that's really complex, actually.
Yes.
So really, actually, somehow we're going to take off that piece because whatever. So if I took that, right, as a piece, normally it would like have confines on like a side seam, and that's wonderful too. I have the ability here to take this and mold it over the form of the body.
Right.
And that's, that means that I can really kind of control tension and form and the ability. It's quite very kind of classic, very 40s right now, very Hollywood as we are here in La La Land. That starts to give you a lot of possibilities in the form of draping. Obviously, you can create dimensions to there, but you can stretch it. It becomes like a little gummy, and that has its own form of, it's like working with watercolor. All of a sudden, you've worked with like paper or charcoal or oil paint that takes time to dry. All of a sudden, you're working with something that has liquidity to it.
Yes.
And I think that's really fun. It also, when it goes off the body and doesn't have tension, has the ability, because it's on an angle, to have really expressive movement that relates to the form of the body. And that's something, I don't know, I get a kick out of that. I like a kick when character is expressed through movement or form, or sound. Fabric is sound or feeling. It's also how clothing makes you feel. I think that's really important in creative process. And that comes usually later when we take something like this and create seam allowance and seam lines to it. So basically, if I drape something, let's quickly put it up. I will also tell you here that I am using a mannequin that is not a traditional mannequin.
Right.
This is a mannequin that is less expensive, so it could be something really good at home. It's like a dress form that is totally foam. Normally dress forms like her are hard. Those are like more traditional mannequins. I kind of prefer my foam mannequins because I can like shoot a pin in really fast.
And it stays.
And it just stays, and it's like quick form, and it's like quick sketch, where normally if I'm doing something very intricate with a form like this, you have to pin from the side, and you would do like multiples, and that's like more controlled. But if I'm, give her a cape, we can, there's so much that could evolve from here, but she looks okay.
If you were on a different budget, if you were on a lower budget, what other fabric would you use instead of silk to start
anything? Canvas, garbage bags.
But will you have the same drape? How you showed us
of a silk drape? I think that a voile is really good. A cotton voile, a synthetic. I think as we look kind of to our planet in the future. It's really important for me to be responsible in that way. I mean, you talk about what I'm thinking about in the future. I'm thinking about how we don't lose our planet. I love nature. I like being in my garden. It's a real responsibility to any young creator right now in the fashion space and fashion industry to really be thinking, about the longevity of and the sustainability of our planet. And unfortunately, through the history, starting from the Silk Roads and then some, and technology and the Industrial Revolution, we are really bad. The fashion industry is a horrible culprit, and that's the only dark part I'll talk about in our conference today. So we really have to really think about that, and there's so many nuances to this, and I'm constantly learning about this. So I'm also really interested in thinking about how we can repurpose clothing.
Yes.
And,
so
and
are there
kind
any
of use
places
what we
where
have.
you can get fabrics from? Sorry to interrupt. Are there places where you, like you said, you used to pick up all the cut-offs in the fashion industry? Are there places where, if you were a student or somewhere where you could like just pick up some bales of fabric for free or cheaper?
Yeah, probably. I imagine so. When I was at school, often I would go. Often I would go to like the secondhand stores and find like, the cheapest, weirdest stuff I could find and chop it up. There's a lot of clothing in the world that is thrown out daily. So like, get use of that. That's what I think today. But there's also, there's a lot of excess inventory of material and fabrics. When I was at school, I was definitely rarely ever like a fine silk was like, a big phone call to say, can I buy this yard? It's just not. And also you gotta hustle, like to make your art. I mean, I would go to like the more posh-ish, we'll say, kind of fabric stores,
Can we
and then
that? Can you turn it around a bit?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just playing.
Fabulous.
That's part of it. I'm not used to talking and doing this, so if it feels like a bore, the piece, whatever, we'll get there. So, I mean, I think you got to make friends. I said it's collaboration. So, I mean, I remember just going, there was like this amazing wash silk and I wanted it and I loved how it moved and felt. And I was just like, I would go every day after lunch and say, is there any way that I can afford this? And this is why, and you got to figure out how to make your work. That's what it is. I mean, I think today, if you're a young filmmaker, you have your iPhone. If you're an actor, create your character that you want to be. Film yourself. You can edit it. I just think we're living in such a time where the rules are really changing. And so, is there a resource? I think there's probably different resources and warehouses and, in different places, different techniques, or even just like t-shirt jersey, cut up old t-shirts and pull and manipulate. This could have been done with jersey. I have jersey right here. It's not from a t-shirt, but I mean, if this was like, some old t-shirt or a sweatshirt, I could simulate a pretty similar thing out of that. From there, don't be intimidated. I also like the translation of like weird home materials into expression. That's why I said garbage bags. If I had a garbage bag right now, I'd give you, the garbage bag arm, the mutton sleeve. But, that's just like a normal jersey t-shirt, and you have that ability as well, and that can be twisted, and I mean that's kind of the moment. Athleisure into high fashion, or in that sense. So I mean, I think you can really be expressive. I could slash that if I wanted to. I mean, high school, what I was doing with is like a lot of how do we torque just something that has stretch in it? Because stretch fabric or stretch things that have a jersey weave to them have that ability too.
Incredible. So you can create cutouts in a sense.
You can cut cutouts. It was kind of like rogue punk t-shirts, you know, and then I'd kind of use symbolism. Sorry, I'm out of frame. You know, then you can use like font or text. You know, I remember, you know, in the nightclub days for me, you know, using things that had kind of other iconography in them as elements or reference to them as well.
Yes.
And like, how do you take that an artistic moment into that? And I think that's kind of interesting of the moment. And then there's also just effect clothing. I mean, later, years later, like the world of embroidery came into my life, which was something topical first for me because I was about form and cut. And, you know, I still think that's what I'm comfortable in, in terms of pieces, but technique, embroidery, and those kind of elements are really, really special and extraordinary, you know, and with great tradition to them as well. Often embroidery historically was used to show power and wealth because of the technique. I mean, it was almost monetary. You know, you talk about bullion, you know, when you see that in like cavalry clothing, you know, and it's like finely woven gold, and you think of the hands and technique, and from there it's like, that's like a whole other world that is quite fun. But, you know, you do that at home too.
The mannequin just forward to the camera so the audience can see what you're pinning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you know what's great about draping in the process is I can say like, what a bore. And, you know, we can like just rip it off, and often, you know, that can be the process there. So, you know, we can get back to our like clean glass of milk. Because, you know, a purist at heart. So, you know, we can go there. And then you can start there. So that's like a bias form, and that's like to the body. Doesn't mean you have to work to the body. You can also have the ability, you know, to take fabric on the straight grain where it's going to start on the straight and then fall in a different way. You know, you can start there, you can gather. You know, you're working with fabric clay. So, you know, I could twist, I can pin, you name it, but what, you know, you want to build or do and express. And from there, that gets translated traditionally into a pattern. And at that point, a pattern maker has to kind of figure out how this gets put together and engineered and constructed, find the seam lines, and from there, you do a first mock-up, at least in my process when I was doing collections. And that you do in a canvas fabric. You said what fabric people can do, like cotton. Just, you know, which is not that great either for the planet, but that's okay right now. You know, you can use just like a cotton canvas. It's called, you know, like a muslin. Yes. And the muslin is, you know, comes in many different weights, and it's something that, you know, is pretty accessible anywhere, and you should play with that. I think it's really great because I love form and construction to start really clean and like find your story. It also, for me, can be very, you can kind of learn what to express. That doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with fashion illustration or sketching or getting that overall look or idea in that way.
Yeah.
I really strongly believe whatever it takes to get that look and vision, you should use. But I do think there's something important for me, at least, or what least really turns me on with great fashion and high fashion is form and structure. Yes. And that's different than great style. It's a very different thing. There's people that I think are great fashion curators and fashion stylists, or even some kind of multimedia collage fashion designers. And I think that's kind of what makes this a very exciting industry. There's people that do unwearable fashion. There's people that just make an incredibly elegant, chic t-shirt and pants. And it's all good. Like, I really have full respect on the full gamut. I am really, I have a real visceral, strong reaction to people that play with form, structure, and soft. And so that's from like Cristobal Balenciaga to Vionnet to Azadine Alaya.
And Comme des Garçons, you mentioned, who's incredible.
And Comme des Garçons and Yoji. And
Yoji.
And Yoji, yes.
Draping and the way that they create with the fabric.
Absolutely. And then I can get really, kind of my fashion on and be really into like a Mucha Prada. I mean, brilliant. Or, even, there's just so many, amazing people and different storytellers too.
Yes.
Yves Saint Laurent was an amazing cultural storyteller. He also definitely knew how to build form and drape, but then he took like that other cultural element into it and different historical elements that were talking about the time we live in or at that time.
Yes.
And, that's why this is an amazing medium. That's why it's an incredible place on creatively to have the ability to kind of find jobs, a place where you can express your work and really start to interact with the community. Because as I said, this is collaboration and one has to get experience to interact in this world. So I highly encourage like this amazing, I wish I had that. I would have had a real blast when I was starting out or getting into this to have that platform, because it was a lot more challenging to have that kind of interaction of a community. And in terms of getting your work out there, the generation that's starting out now, although I would say privacy, anonymity is questioned probably a little bit, you have the ability today to self-create in a different way and really build a world and really share that with other creatives. And that's why I think Creatively is an amazing platform.
Yes, it's a great thing because you can share it globally. You don't have to be in the same city or country to see another creative's work on the website. So it's
look, we have beautiful chiffon. I mean, how amazing is that? A crepe chiffon. Trying to think of other things that I think are really important. Knowing or things that I have run into in my time. You always have to kind of be a little bit cognizant of the width of your fabric, because you have to make sure that the final fabric that you're doing it in has the same dimensions. Otherwise, you can kind of really mess up pattern makers, or they have to put in weird seams, and that's like just a pet peeve of mine. So, it's do your art history, learn your craft, hone it, and then forget it all. And then just see what comes out of you and what you're feeling at that time in the music, and whether that's like casual clothing, I don't know, whatever that is. There's so many elements in fashion, and there really are no rules. For me, the rules are taking your idea and really knowing that you're going to continually refine it. It can be shocking, it can be peaceful. It's like music, dance, and life all together. And we also have to remember our greatest creator that we have is Mother Nature. Because she's just wild. And she's just beautiful. She's perverse. She's mean. And we have to respect that. So I always try to think of like how we are in touch with that and how those elements can be expressed, and you can't really ever come that close. It's like every time you try to find that form, maybe it starts to feel contrived or trite, or but you try. You try to find that magic form of how genetics work and build forms in odd materials and are growing at the same time. I don't know if I sound totally wacko right now,
No, but
these are real things for me.
Yes, well, nature is such a great source of inspiration as well in design. As a designer,
almost everything's nature.
Everything, yeah.
Science is nature. Synthetic fabrics are nature in some element. There's a chemical combination of it. There's so many species. Mushroom fabric is really cool. Bamboos. There's a lot of different, plays of different sustainable things, and we just have to learn. For a generation that's coming out there, please look at natural forms of coloration and dyeing, because dyes and those chemicals are just awful for our planet. And that was a real problem for me when I had my own line for many years, and it still is. I still have many different kind of elements, even though I don't have my own collection brand. Over my time and my own business journey today, there are lines under my name, and how do you balance that responsibility is something that I'm continuously questioning as an entrepreneur and as a creator and as a person, because you are leaving an imprint. So I think leave a beautiful imprint and try, to be sensitive.
Yeah. So with the form to your right, with the legs, what do you use that form? Do you drape on that as well?
Well, that would be pants. I mean, she's very mini Winnie. Let's just say that to start, okay? So this, this could be, I could drape a gown on this. I could drape a dress on this. You have the forms, but she could be leggings. She could be undies. So you have the ability to, to have a leg. And this was a challenge. This was a challenge from a friend of mine, because we are in Malibu.
Okay.
She wanted couture sweatpants.
Fabulous.
So we're gonna go there. We're just gonna see what form would happen with some fabulous sweatpants into our next.
You need that now, because with working from home, and you want to look glamorous but be comfortable. So I think this is a winner.
Yeah, this is good, right? We're comfy and we're glamorous, and I mean, I'm not a sweatpants person. Do I love it? As I turned 40 this week, it was thank you. It was like exercise time, and like let's get in shape, and like my 3-piece suits. Although I can run miles in them and up mountains, planes, trains. I'm really happy in my cozy clothing in this moment. So I think if we had a seam there, I think that could be quite nice. I will fill in later. Then when you're draping, know that you have an inseam in a pair of, in a form of a pant. I kind of think there could be something quite lousy and elegant, but I think you want the butt to kind of look good. I don't love probably when I was on a TV show called Project Runway. I was a judge, and there were a lot of reactions to what I called I think I called them like poopy pants. Really good,
Why
zinger one-liners. What?
What's the shape of the poopy pants?
I don't, just something, and I love a harem pant or something lousy, but it's just, if you're gonna dress, let's dress.
Yeah.
And then let's be expressive, and
as you said, it's all about
it's all about the form, and I don't know, it's just that's that. But I don't mind, I think I really believe anything goes, and everything has a time and place.
Yes. And it's all subjective as well.
It's all subjective. Style, fashion, editorial, all of this is subjective as long as it's authentic. That's really, really, really it's like pure. And, there's great platforms to see shared ideas, but like get rid of them and see what comes out of you if you're creating. I think
Yes.
it's really, that's like really important. You know, that's definitely something that I look at a lot, you know, with designers and brands, and finding, you know, or creators of any sort. It's like find your voice, and that could take time. It can be painful. Like creativity is not always a joy, and also building a career out of being creative is challenging. And you know, nobody ever said this was going to be easy. You know, try to forget and have the joy in the process, but it might be torturous at times. And if you do whatever it takes to be able to do what you do, and that's just part of life. I don't even think that's like beyond our draping class today.
But you learn so much from the mistakes within training or design or anything. So I think it is quite relevant in that sense. You know, you learn from the mistakes you make in clothing design. Something didn't work, so you refine it in some sort of way.
Exactly. So sorry, because I'm pretty quick. So I did a little thing already that one wouldn't see, which is that I doubled it on the bias, and that's going to contour and make the body look smooth and really good, and hold you. Let's see. So, you know, we take to center back here. I mean, I really am going to be amused if we sew these up and somebody's like wearing them at the Mart in Malibu. Okay, so we get there. Try and think if there's any other elements to this. I mean, I really think t-shirts, like get t-shirts. T-shirts are available pretty much everywhere. You know, landfills are filled with t-shirts right now. So find t-shirts, chop them up, sew them up. If you don't have a sewing machine, get pins. You know, safety pins are great. Staples,
yes.
Hot glue. I just really, you know, because I watch so many old movies, I think I have like an old world thing in me. And I think the real, you know, that's that. And, you know, I love having the classic elements to that. And I'll get more comfortable over time just losing all of that. I can't wait. There are no rules.
And what are you doing at the back?
I'm getting, okay, I'll get there, sorry. I am cutting away. That would be a center back seam here, right? So I'm building there, and then I got that on, and then I can like clean up in a way. So like I have that on there, so it's like established, but I think because we're double here, like if I were building this as a piece for production, what I would be aware of right now is that it would probably have in the fold an inside elastic waistband to hold it up. So it's like a real pull-on, comfy moment. I also think like, you know, you should find as much reading material as possible and books, because as well as like fashion history, we also have to like, there's so many books in the world and paper, and we don't necessarily need that much more. And save your stuff, clip. I mean, I know you're into building lots of mood boards and inspiration. So I say like, collect. Don't let it go away. Like, even if it's like in a magazine, if it's like one image you like, cut that out and keep it and make folders. And, you know, I often find in the virtual world that a lot of stuff disappears. And Pinterest is fabulous, but there's a lot of stuff that's like not there. And I think you have to find, that's a great way to find your personal voice.
Yes. So
I tried to ban Pinterest in my design studio for a long time. Also flip-flops.
Oh, I banned Uggs when I worked in a design studio.
Yeah, it's like, come on. Feels height, femininity, and power. In my boots now, no longer in
So
my
when you
boots.
finished a drape, do you photograph it or you hand it to a pattern cutter, especially if you're just playing? How do you remember?
So that has changed. I definitely photograph it. That is for sure. I definitely take photos. I also have started to photograph and then work on a computer from the image. And I love that. That's fun. That's like Candyland time. Because then I could like then I can like say this, I could put a print on it, I could put a pattern on it. Once it's a digital form, it has like a whole other element. I mean, that's a real great way to challenge a pattern maker. But I've actually had really amazing processes with that because, for example, I could take like that element and it could become like that large in it. And that's kind of new to me and exciting to me and scary all at the same time, which is a good place to be with one's creative process.
Well, that's fabulous.
So, that could be a center front seam. Then if I wanted to mark a side seam, right? Because you're kind of probably going to want a side seam so that your factories wouldn't want to kill you, which often, it's okay. It's okay to challenge them. So normally I would take like a pen. Does anybody have a pen or a pencil? Do we still have? Toss it. Thank you. So here, for example, I could take, a line or a piece of tape and I could build the side seam there, right? I would have the ability to say, that can become a welt pocket. A welt pocket, is something kind of traditional, but now you see it in all kinds of apparel or clothing or sportswear. So you could put the zipper there. You have the side seam there. Probably in like this part of the back, often you're going to want to like catch it so that it holds. So I could mark, for example, what is a dart? A dart is when you're taking a section of fabric out and it brings it in. I could bring the dart to there, right? That's like a good place because like the curve of the body just starts there.
So in a way, you're creating a roadmap as well of all the other details that are going to be on it, which is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could just do form. That can happen in different steps of the process. I could say that a side seam comes down there, but not for me. I could put the zipper fly. So that could be just a straight zipper. That could be a fly zipper. If it was a fly zipper, it's something like that would come up.
And that was really interesting to see it come to life from a piece of fabric. It's
like that. I don't know.
Fantastic watching the drape. It's brilliant.
I know that there would be an invisible dotting of stitch that would go around like that inside, right? So that'd be like a different kind of sewing machine. It would be like a floating stitch inside. And, you might want to mark that because let's say like you want it on the waist, but if I didn't, I would have that lower. So that's there. So you can have a slit there. We could also, from there, for example, I don't know. What could we do?
We're going to be wrapping up shortly.
Yeah.
So, whilst you continue, can I ask you just a couple of questions from the audience?
Bring them on.
Okay, so the first question is from Kirsten Hardwick. She said, "Hi, Zach. I'm currently a student pursuing my dream in fashion design. What is the best piece of advice that you wish you were given when you first started off?"
The best piece of advice that I wish I had been given when I was starting out would be really to take my time and to get as much experience as possible. I was speaking to a friend of mine that when I was living in London, and he was really there in this beginning stage yesterday. And I said, and he's an artist in a totally different medium. And I just said, in some ways, I wish that my ambition and drive and opportunity in some way maybe had slowed down, and that I had had more creative incubation time. So if you can find a way to afford that, instead of just trying to shoot right away, but I think that's something that's important to me. I will also say, again, it depends what you want to do, but building a real brand, and if it's in luxury, in my opinion, takes a lifetime, and you're really kind of creating something for, you can create something that's going to be for the moment and it becomes a thing, or it only, things don't have to be forever. And I think that's really important. You can make something that's 1 year, maybe it's a brand that's about a brand each season. I think that's possible today. Doesn't have to be something bigger. I think we're living in a time, so that's where I think it's give yourself the creative time to really, really know what you want to say, because it's a very saturated industry, and I'm not discouraging anybody, but I think you really have to really believe that this is something you really love to do and know what your strengths are. I think part of building a brand different than making clothing, is to know that you're going to be the face of your brand, because people often like to, for the most part, connect to the idea of a person behind it. So you really need to be comfortable with that as well, because it is a human industry. We are dealing with humans and form and function and selling and all these other elements. And all of that, for me, gives me that moment of, I did all of that for years in some way, so that I learned over years to have the time and process to do that, or what we did today, but in my own concentrated time when I'm not on camera.
So from Tracy Neal, she would like to know what's next for Mr. Posen.
I'm working on a lot of different projects. What is next for Mr. Posen? I'm assessing different opportunities within the fashion field and in other fields. Obviously, my craft and technique is something I feel very strongly about. It's been a very interesting experience after 20 years of being on a real rocket ship ride, and where I kind of physically, emotionally, everything pushed myself to that and lived off that adrenaline, and loved every minute of it, even through the hard times. So at this moment, I'm kind of assessing where I think I want to challenge myself next, and express myself next, and where I can be an asset to it and take an adventure. So I can't say where and what in fashion, but I have some kind of exciting ideas and opportunities, and I will also hopefully soon, continue figuring out what with my own name happens next to that. And then working, obviously, I'm interested in how we connect to food and our garden, and working on something like that, and storytelling. So whether that is building sculptures or building film or television, it's all there. And we are living in very odd times, and I have to say, scary, it's terrifying. But that's okay, to be in this kind of comfort place right now. It's a scary comfort place at the same time. It's giving me time over the last year to really kind of assess what I feel like I can offer and what I can say. But I am an optimist, and I believe that I have a lot still to say and to do and create and bring beauty into the world and make women or men and whoever, whatever and however you define yourself, feel incredible and empowered. And I know that my purpose is to help people dream and believe that they can be in touch with their creativity, because to me, creativity is as important as sleeping and eating and making love. And I think it's important, and I think the world needs it to evolve in a healthy, peaceful way. So I hope I can be involved in it in some capacity like that. At the moment, I'm working on a lot of different kind of private commissions, and just assessing, the right place that I might have the opportunity to work at.
And my final question from Magda Khan: how do you see formal wear moving forward post-COVID, given the limited gatherings and people actually dressing down instead of dressing up?
How do you see formal wear? Well, I think formal wear, and whatever, to me, kind of, that's an odd definition. But, formal wear, kind of in its original form, is kind of based on an event. Obviously, the red carpet and the Hollywood image glamour game has been a big part of that, and something that I've been involved in for many years, and been very successful at and have loved. But it's gonna, I think, where do I see it in the future? I think people will always want to dress. People will always want to express themselves. There's always going to be people that want to be more understated, more over the top. And I think we are living in a time where formality, in a sense, is being partially challenged, and I think that's great. And I think it needed a big shakeup, right? But beauty will always prevail.
Yeah.
So I think beauty will always be there in some capacity, and formalities, are, and tradition, I would say, will always be part of our story.
Wonderful answers. It's such a beautiful ending to a fantastic class. Thank you so much. That was our Creatively class with Zach Posen about the creative expression of form through draping. Thank you so much, Zach, for your incredible words, wisdom, everything for the community. And thank you, Creatively, for giving us the space to have such a powerful conversation about the power of fashion.
Thank you.